My name is Monique Kawecki. I'm here from Champ Magazine to introduce designer and creative entrepreneur Melody Ehsani.
At the most limited edition event at Sole.
It's not too hot in here.
Does this
so it's all
work?
right. Yeah, maybe like closer.
Okay.
So based in LA, Melody is a designer, shoes, clothing, and her pivotal and bold jewelry designs. We're here to talk to her about her design blueprint for art and design and how she's reached to the point where she is. We were just talking before that next year she has her 10-year anniversary. So let's find out a little bit more about how you got to this point. Let's start with the blueprint. So basically, we all have an individual blueprint, and it kind of stems from our DNA. Let's talk a bit about your design so your upbringing in LA with your Iranian parents.
So I was born and raised in Los Angeles, and I grew up in a very traditional Iranian family. But obviously, as a lot of first generation people know, it's kind of like you're living a double life, where at home you have one sense of like culture where like my parents never spoke English to me in the house, and then outside of the home I was listening to hip hop and had all friends that weren't Iranian, and so I was very influenced by sort of both sides of the culture, so to speak.
Because you mentioned that a lot of your peers or your family moved into also law, and that's kind of how you first begun outside of school, but you found you were disillusioned, and then you found your path in design. So can you tell us, like, maybe you learnt a little bit through that, your interest in social justice and women's rights, but what was it that really drew you to design?
I think it's interesting because growing up I was just trying to be good. Like a lot of kids, you just want to please your parents, you just want to be like a good kid, so to speak. And my dad died when I was 10, and then after he died I sort of took on this role where I felt like I was responsible for my mom and my brother, and I just took on this very responsible role, and I really wanted to please her and my family. And so I think that I did things based on that kind of decision making, as opposed to really looking in and being like, what am I good at? What do I want to do? I just never even viewed those things as an option, and I never had an education outside of the basic things like law, medicine, pharmacy if you were really daring, things like that. So I started to sort of seek my passion when I was in college, but I did it from more of a superficial standpoint, where I wasn't really asking the big questions, but I was still asking questions. So I'd be like, okay, what am I passionate about? And I narrowed that down to justice. I was like, justice is something that really is like within my body. Like I don't like racism, I don't like sexism, I want equality. And these were things that I wanted to fight for. So within the upbringing that I was in, I was like, well, law, that's the only way that I could do that kind of thing. And so I kind of sought out to do every single internship under the sun to figure out what type of law I wanted to do. So I did all that, and at the end of that, I was left completely disenchanted with law. I was like, I don't know how I'm going to wake up every single day for the rest of my life and do this.
Yeah, like a restricted structure, not really much creativity, but...
Yeah, well, and the legal system in the US is so bad that I didn't really even feel like I could put a dent into it. It just felt like such a huge burden to bear, and I didn't know if I was the one to take on that burden. So I got really depressed for a while because I didn't know. I was like, I'm not who I thought I was. What do I do? And then I just started doing a lot of self-reflection and going in and figuring out, like asking myself the real questions. And
does that come at a point where you're, really like kind of at the bottom, you do need a different type of path for the rest of your life, or
Wait, what was that?
do you come to that kind of point where you're really
Oh yeah, rock bottom. I felt like I was at rock bottom because I had dropped out of school, not dropped out of school, I'd finished college, I had gotten accepted to like one of the best law schools, and I had deferred, which was a big deal. And I had spent all my mom's money on applications and, you know, LSAT prep courses and all this stuff. And now I was like, oh, I'm not gonna do that. You know, and that was really challenging for me because I had invested so much time and energy and resource into it, and then to decide I don't want to do that.
So how did you find how did you empower yourself to make this big move?
Like I said, I was depressed for a long time, and I had, thankfully, I had a few people in my life that really, well, it was interesting. I had a lot of people in my life. All the people that were closest to me, funny enough, like, were really upset at me. Like, what are you doing? I got all the backlash, you know, from like my mom and my family and even my closest friends that I was in school with. They just sort of like moved on without me, without caring to like take me with them, which was really hurtful at the time. But I think that they just didn't understand what I was going through. So they were like, okay, peace. We'll see you on the other side.
Yeah. And how do you begin to you started with clothing design actually, and then you moved into the jewelry. How did you know, what to do or how to, where you wanted to start actually in this design world?
How was I able to design them? I kind of taught myself a lot of the stuff. I had a friend that taught me how to use Illustrator, which is a computer program, because I don't like drawing. To me, drawing is very technical and it's not the creative part of design to me. So I learned how to use Illustrator, which is a really easy way to draw on the computer. And I just taught myself how to do it.
So Melody started her brand in 2008, and it was an online, you had your products online for 4 years, and then in 2012 she opened her own store on Fairfax Avenue. So for anyone that's been to LA, you know that Fairfax is, they've got amazing stores on the block, but it is male dominated. You've got your Supreme, you've got your, I guess around the corner is Stussy, and then right next door to Melody is 424. So I guess, it's quite amazing that you got to that point, designing and then opening a store open to the public to create a community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How, okay, so online store, like a lot of people, start their brand, and then they can, we've got the outlets to begin that ourselves. But how do you find a location? Why did you choose Fairfax? And do you need an investor, or what kind of support do you need?
Mm-hmm. Well, the cool thing about what I did was I was really self-made. Like I started with a $5,000 savings because I started working when I was like 14 or 15, and I had saved money. And so I just started making stuff out of my house, and I really grew it. Like I kind of calculated it as like I would make like 100 pairs of shoes, and then I'd be like, okay, this is how many pairs I need to sell to make rent and to live this month. And that's how I lived until I started making a profit. And by the time I opened the store, I was doing really well. And I actually hated retail. I didn't want to open a store. I worked in the mall growing up, and I just didn't like retail at all. But something internally just kept telling me that I needed to do it because I didn't want to sell wholesale. The idea of like selling to other stores and then not having them display it the way I wanted them to display it, or handling the stuff the way that I wanted them to handle it, like really kind of bothered me.
Or even with your staff, you just select the girls that work in the store, they create the energy.
Exactly. So I kind of wanted to create that space, and so I I know all the guys that are in Fairfax. I grew up with a lot of them, and it was the only street that sort of felt authentic to me because I went down there just to hang out normally, and it just seemed like a natural fit. So there was literally not any other location in LA that I would have done it.
And you've kind of like, well, I mean, the brand definitely has a community around it. Hanging out with you yesterday, you know, many of the guests here at Sole were coming up to Melody and telling her how much they, you know, love her designs and have purchased them over many years. And that's like one example, but another one is the speaker series that Melody does at her store. So it's kind of like educating the community that you've created and nourishing them with knowledge. Actually, we've got a snippet of the speaker series.
Oh, yeah.
For the thing.
Well, to tell you guys about it, the speaker series is something that I'm really passionate about because when I opened the store, I always wanted it to have more of a purpose rather than just retail. And I always imagined like creating a sense of community and like really just engaging with our customers in a different way and providing a platform for like-minded people. And so we started doing this series where every month we would bring somebody else that we thought was cool to talk about whatever. So it could be anything about like sex education or politics or we had like Saul Williams, who's a poet, come and do story night one night. And they've become really successful, which is really cool. And it's really funny, actually. I'm going to show you guys a photo of it. So this was like an example of the last one we did with Lena Waithe, who's, I don't know if you guys have the show out here, Master of None. So she's the first black woman to ever win an Emmy Award for comedic writing. And Melina, who's one of my best friends, is the director of Insecure, the HBO show, and she also directed the episode that Lena wrote that she won the Emmy for. So we did it, and we received like 1,000 RSVPs, and we had like over 300 people stand outside to get in. And the dopest part about it to me was that like all night and the next day, everybody on the street from all the other stores were like, Mel, what did you drop last night? Like, congratulations, you know, because Fairfax is known for lines. And it gave me so much pleasure to be like, yo, we drop knowledge. That's what we drop. So that was really dope. And we actually fit in like 150 people into our store, which is insane. As you could tell, it's like packed, but the kind of energy that gets created and the kind of people that connect, and like, it's just so magical that it just feels like probably one of the most fulfilling parts of being able to have a space like this. And those were our speakers. We had our surprise guest, Michael Ealy, who's an actor, so that was really cool.
Because when other brands or stores on Fairfax are just selling product, they're, one after another, you know, knowledge, that's one of the best gifts you can give somebody, and that's free as well. So it's just about organizing it and having the space to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I feel really lucky to be able to do it. It's such a privilege.
Another thing, so going back to Melody's interest in social justice and women's rights, in her clothing designs and in the store designs, you know, she'll have like mottos or like inspirational messages for all the guests or the buyers. I guess, you know, another way to empower, like subliminally or unconsciously, but it's really important to do that.
Yeah, you know, I think the same way that there are trends in fashion, there are trends in humanity, and one of my best friends, actually, she's really good at reading those types of trends, and it's so interesting to see where we are as a civilization and like what we're going through, because generally when we're going through things, we're all going through the same kinds of things. We're just not talking about it, so we don't know. So oftentimes it'll be like moments where I'll be like, what's my role? That was a big trend, even now I think, where I noticed that a lot of, especially youth, were asking this big question of like, what's my role? And really, they would be like, oh, I think I'm a model, or oh, I want to be a blogger, or I'm a creative director. And it's like, is that what you really are, though? And when you would really talk to them, I would learn that like the real question that they were asking was like, hey, if I do this, will you see me now? Or if I do this, then will you see how amazing I am? So it's really this thing of like people just trying to be seen and trying to figure out who they are and why they're here. But we're asking the question so superficially that we're not getting to the bottom of it. So that became like my goal that year, to be like, okay, what can I share? What questions can I pose to people that'll be like, hey, if I ask you this, then will it wake you up? Or if I ask you this, then will it make you think about who you really are? Not what you think people want you to be, but who you really, really are.
Because I guess the industry is now really fast-paced. Things are moving so quickly, especially with the digital age. Mm-hmm. So to even like remind people to stop and think and reflect, that's even a powerful tool in itself.
Yeah, and it's a lot of pressure. I mean, just Instagram alone, like I've talked about this before, but it's so much pressure to look a certain way or to be a certain way or to do a certain thing. And I call it compare and despair. Like if I'm not in a good place in myself, like if I'm scrolling on Instagram, I'm just like, what am I doing with my life? Am I really who I think it's just all those voices that we all have.
Yeah, don't stay on Instagram too long.
Yeah. So it's like, I like to create the counter of that, is like, how can we find memory of who you are versus like forgetfulness? And for me, Instagram is one of those things that oftentimes makes me forget who I am versus remember. And I found that the only way that you could really find remembrance or memory is by doing things you love. And that includes eating things you love, being around people you love. So if you really love doing things, just by virtue of you doing that thing, I promise you that there will be information for you in that process. So if you love scuba diving, go scuba diving. Like that's a thing that I promise you'll get information about your purpose and why you're here through doing that thing. So
step by step, really.
Yeah.
But a lot of people sometimes are afraid to get out of their comfort zone or what they know or the pressure from others.
Or we just do things that we
feel comfortable doing.
Yeah.
That we know.
Even with food, it's so interesting. Like there are certain foods that we gravitate towards when we're feeling certain ways that will literally take you out. Like they make you tired. They don't make you feel like, they don't support who you are as a person. And it's like, well, why, it's kind of like being asleep. Like, why are you doing that? So I think it's really important to sort of awaken. And the only way that we can awaken is really by really having a regimen about what we're consuming across the boards, not just food, but social media, everything. Like, who are you talking to? Who are your friends? Are they really mirroring who you really are? Or are they making you forget who you are? Do they question who you are? Like, these are all the bigger questions that we have to really be mindful of especially when we're trying to grow or develop who we are in the world, because it's the most sacred thing and we need the utmost support for it. So you really have to find what your support looks like.
One of the mottos that Melody communicates is stop waiting to be who you really are.
Yeah.
And yes, so simple, but it really is that.
It's true.
So, yeah. Getting back to the individuality, so Melody's products are, they integrate easily into other people's style. So she's not forcing on a particular style to anybody. It's really like customizable in a way. And that's another way that we can incorporate this like individuality when everyone else is buying the same products or looking the same way.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in the era of hip hop where it was like the most important thing was to be individual. And so everybody that I grew up seeing on TV had like you know, it was like the era of Dapper Dan where like Big Daddy Kane would come on and wear like the custom MCM jacket that nobody else had. And that was what was dope. And more recently in this generation, I feel like it's fashion and style has almost become more of a prescription rather than an individual expression. And so I really try to encourage expression rather than you know, like hop on trends or operate more from like a prescription standpoint.
And all products are made in your atelier, so the studio in LA?
Yep.
Yeah, all handmade?
Everything is made in LA.
Yeah. Melody's also got her pop-up just around the corner, so you can have a look at the designs later in the day. But a question is, how do you deal with like copycats in the industry? Now, like a lot of brands and designers need to deal with this, so how do you personally approach it?
When I first started, actually, I started getting knocked off a lot, and I was so upset by it, and everybody was like, oh, imitation is flattery, and I was like, okay, but it's hurtful. And only because I didn't have a big enough name, so somebody could come and take my item and like knock it off for $5 and sell 1 million of it. And sometimes it would even look like I copied them because they had such a bigger reach that, you know, I wouldn't even have the opportunity to grow my brand. But I remember the turning point for me was I was actually in Paris one year, and I went to the Basquiat exhibit. And I remember standing in front of his paintings and really feeling something in front of them. And it's like his paintings had his essence in them. And afterwards, I was so excited to go to the gift shop and buy his print. And I went to the gift shop and I was like, ugh, this print contains nothing. I don't want this dumb print. And I didn't end up buying it. And that was a moment that I realized that on some level, we consume consciously, and you buy something because it contains that special thing, because it makes you feel a certain way, or because of the person that made it, or because of the intention that was put into it. And I realized that all the people that were buying from me were going to continue buying from me because they knew what was behind it. And it didn't matter that, you know, some big fashion brand or fast fashion company was knocking me off, because they have their own place in the market and they have their own customer, and that customer is most likely not my customer. So it just made me feel like there's no such thing as competition, and that we all have a place and we all have a role, even in that kind of situation.
I guess, yeah, it has a feeling when it's handmade. Unconsciously, we're drawn to the items. And which leads me to talk about who requests and wears your jewelry designs. So it's Solange, Beyonce, Rihanna. And I was asking Melody, like, how do you get on them? Do you work with the stylist? How does that happen? But actually, they all request directly to Melody, which is amazing. They come to you. So much easier.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Why do you think they're drawn to your brand? Is it the unique individual designs?
I don't know. I think that
do they know you personally beforehand, or do they just see the designs and reach out?
Yeah. I think it's just that, like, it's the thing of like-mindedness. There's rarely been a musician or an artist or anybody that I've worked with that doesn't fit into or isn't like-minded, you know? So I think it's just like when you're on in a certain tribe, or I don't know.
Doing something right. Okay, so with your work ethic, are there ever any times that you're, where do you find your inspiration? If you're feeling unmotivated, how do you get back on track? Or, you know, you're leading this big company, reaching its 10th anniversary. How do you, stay focused?
Well, I always stay focused, but
Truly.
yeah. I think it's really hard for me because I didn't set out to be a business person, and I think I kind of became one by accident. I really wanted to just be in a room all day creating things. I never thought that I would have employees and that I'd have to worry about contracts and,
Being a business owner, how much is like the creative versus like the admin and business side?
It's
Like
50-50.
50,
Yeah. It's definitely, I do everything. And I don't have any other designers that work under me. So I literally design everything, which is insane. And I don't have any business partners, so I'm doing everything, which is also really insane. So,
Because when you take out, you've mentioned you take out 2 weeks every 3 months to design.
yeah.
Do you like completely turn everything else off and immerse
Yeah,
yourself?
I try to do that. That was actually more realistic a few years ago. As of late, in the last probably 3-4 years, it's become really hard for me to do that. But the best thing for me is if I'm like, for me, nature is a big thing. Like it just makes me feel like I'm not alone or that there's something bigger than me. And whenever I feel like outside of myself, like it's not about me, that's when I get inspired, where I just like more so become an instrument or like a vessel rather than think about it, you know?
Because were there any mentors that you also kind of had a similar path that you could seek guidance from?
Oddly, no, I haven't had any mentors that have the same path, but most of my mentors were mentors that helped me know me, but I don't have business mentors, which I would really love. Yeah, I would really love that. But the thing about mentorship is you can't really ask for it. You know, it's kind of weird to be
Natural as
like,
well.
hey, will you be my mentor? I feel like it's such a huge thing to put on someone. So, yeah, it just hasn't happened yet, but I hope it will.
Yeah, you find your own tools as
Yeah.
you've done and you do it yourself.
Yeah.
Who's given you the best advice throughout your entire career that has been pivotal to the next step?
Oh, one of my close friends, her name is Julie Burns Walker. She's just, I think she's given me the best advice because she's the only person that I think sees me for me, as opposed to like seeing what she wants to see, or she's just got this thing where she doesn't project anything on me, so it just gives me permission to be myself, which is really, it sounds like it could be normal, but it's actually kind of rare.
So it's someone that's known you for a long time.
Yeah.
Nice. And then I guess they see through the industry or,
Yeah.
you know, the obstacles or existing structures.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, great. So when do you find time to self-learn? Is it, outside of, shoes or clothing or, your own materials that you're working with? Do you also visit museums or galleries, or what's like an
Yeah.
outside world hobby that you have?
I'm a big researcher. I'm a nerd like that, where I love learning about things, and then when I learn about something that I like, I go deep into a hole with it. So.
Because is Los Angeles the main inspiration, maybe?
No, not really. I think it's played a major role, but I think it's ever changing. Yeah.
Okay, what's a typical day like in the store? Do you, yeah, we should ask the girls as well.
Yeah. A typical day in the store. It's different every day. It's so hard to say. I think because we're doing everything in a sort of non-traditional way, that it's very different every day.
Do you run seasonally? Do you
No.
comply to?
We don't. Yeah. Up to now, I try to be on seasons, but I kind of make things whenever I'm inspired.
So you were the first designer to co-design for Reebok, and you're on your 4th collaboration with them now. Does your work strategy change when you're working with them, or do you apply the same kind of design ethic?
Well, design-wise, it's the same thing, but when I go there, I have a whole team that works under me, and
It's their team.
yeah,
And it's just you.
it's their team. So it's just resources that I don't have at home. So if I need something, they do all the sourcing. They do all, they just do all the legwork that typically I would do. And they have so much more access than I do to stuff.
And then you also have the freedom to art direct, suggest what kind of
I do all the
editorials you wanna do.
design, top to bottom. Yeah.
Melody was the first woman to redesign the pump, the iconic Reebok shoe pump. How did you feel like approaching this kind of big project?
I actually didn't realize that that a girl hadn't done it before. Yeah. I was actually kind of shocked when I found out that I was the first one, just because I felt like it's so late in the game that it should have happened already. But it was really cool. I mean, I kind of grew up. I grew up playing basketball, and when I was younger, basketball stars were like my celebrities, and they're who I geeked out over. So it was really cool to be able to. I never would have thought that I would have had my own basketball shoe at some point. It was like a dream come true.
So you could choose that. They said come to our archive or.
Oh no, I chose it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. And that was the same with the Allen Iverson question project? Yeah.
Well, the Allen Iverson, it was the 20-year anniversary of the question.
So Allen Iverson is iconic basketball player.
Yeah, you
in
guys
America.
know who Iverson is.
Oh, you guys know? Nice.
I actually have pictures, I think.
Nice. Perfect.
I have pictures of a lot of the Reebok stuff I did. They're kind of out of order, but actually my collaboration is just coming to an end, which is sad, but I'm also really happy because I can do other things now.
But you can still see, so this 4th collaboration, it's in the Reebok space and Melody
So this
space.
is my last, this is what we just did. So we usually, we usually do like a apparel collection with it, which is really cool because Reebok kind of gave me free reign to do whatever I want, which was really dope. And then I got to do other things like,
Sorry, well, the 2 girls in the photograph are friends?
Oh yeah, no,
And then
they're not friends of mine. They're actually friends of the
Each
photographer who works for me. And they're best friends. They've known each other for 20 years. And so I just like to highlight like real relationships. And so it was really cool that they were real people. I'd rather use real people than models. And then I did, it was really cool too because I got to bring in other people that I admired that I could work with. So many of you know Hassan Hajjaj. He's an artist based out of Morocco. So I got to do like a 3-way collab with him and Reebok where I incorporated the Senegalese mats that he uses in all his iconic photos, and we turned it into jacquard. And based on this, we did Oh, one of them's missing. Anyway, we did like a his and hers pair of shoes out of jacquard, which was really cool. And then this was the pump that I did. This was the first one. That was our. And then
Is that the one that sold out overnight?
Yeah, all of these have. This one actually sold out in 15 minutes, which was probably one of the fastest sellouts, which was really cool. And we did like custom nail wraps that went with it. So whoever ordered them online, like we put free nail stickers in them. And I've always done different shoelaces because I feel like every color makes the shoelace look so different, which is something a lot of other people are starting to do now, which is really exciting because it's such a simple thing, but it makes such a big difference when it comes to sneakers. This was the first pair that I ever did with them. So this was actually, the story of this was cool because somebody at Reebok really liked my jewelry, so they asked me to do an influencer program with them, which is like, hey, collaborate with us on these shoes, and then we'll give you 50 pairs and post them on social media, and that's it. Like, that's the program. And so we did it, and back then I was making everything in-house, like all the jewelry, so my website didn't have an inventory counter on the back end. So we got the shoes and we put them up on Friday, and then Friday night at midnight, I think, and then Monday morning we came back to work and we had sold over 3,000 shoes over the weekend on our website.
And how quick can they produce that?
Yeah, so I called Reebok like, I don't know what happened, and we kept trying to see if it was a glitch. Like, we were like, is this correct? And it was actually like they had made 3,000. So Reebok actually allowed me to buy, I think, 1,500 pairs off of them. So we shipped the first 1,500 pairs out, and then they were able to produce another 1,500 pairs in a matter of a month and a half. And every single person that had bought them waited a month and a half for the additional 1,500, which is what ended up getting me a deal with them, because they realized that there was a larger market for women's shoes than they had anticipated. So that was really cool.
Because going back to your pump design, the pump was only available in menswear sizes before that?
Yeah.
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 So that's kind of crazy to think about that.
Yeah, it was really cool. Like, it was only available in men's sizes, so for the pump they actually sized down to women's. And then I also adjusted the sole, because those shoes are really bulky. So I just I slenderized them a little bit so it didn't feel like you were wearing bricks on your feet. So yeah, it was really cool that they allowed me to do that. Yeah.
Actually, a lot of the other companies also need to have more women's options or ranges. So I guess it opens the door now that you're going to be focusing on the brand. And
a lot of people are doing
time.
some incredible stuff now. Yeah.
So maybe right now I'll open up to the audience. Does anyone have any questions or anything they'd like to ask?
So obviously your store is the title of your store, Fairfax, which is the most famous streetwear street in the world, and it's mostly men dominated. I used to live in LA, and all my friends used to hang out there all the time, so I was growing up with them as well. And I was one of the few girls who was just there because I wanted to be part of this culture. How does it feel to be the only woman, or like the only girl with brand that has this physical presence in the street that is so like men driven?
It's really cool. I mean, it's interesting because when I moved in there, it wasn't as crazy as it is now. It was a lot more low key. So the only people that were there were skaters. It just wasn't as what it is now. And so a lot of hype has kind of come into play in the last 5 years, which has really changed the street, which is great. I mean, it's part of evolution, but it's a little sad for me because it's kind of lost its, like that thing that made it special before, where not a lot of people knew about it or whatnot. But I don't know. It's funny because we don't really think about being the only girls there, but when I did move in, I really hoped that more women's brands would come there, and I'm really sad that nobody else has yet. But it's cool because I kind of feel like a good equalizer on the block, So like a lot of the guys that work on the street, it's so sweet because they come in through the back door and hang out with us in the office and talk about real shit. Like, they'll talk about their breakups or their emotions or, just things that they can't like talk to their boys about. Because if you're standing outside of Supreme, like, it's just not like that. Everybody's like posing, and it's a lot of pressure. Like, I don't know how those kids do it. But so it's kind of cool that they get to like come hang out and just be chill and have like feminine energy.
Because I guess it's the common interest of like hip hop, basketball. There's like so many common factors. that there's not really any need for separation, although it is difficult when other women don't see role models out there, you know, with their own business, running their own companies. Yeah. We need more of that.
We do.
To highlight that Melody's the only woman speaking at this event series. So it's really great. She's leading the way for everyone. Any other questions?
Do you think that like the proliferation of social media and like pop culture's constant need to be sharing that human creativity?
I don't know if it's diluted is the right word, but I definitely think it's changed creativity. Like, what was that term I heard? There was like a term for seeing something and copying it, but not remembering that that's where you saw it. You know, so I feel like a lot of that is happening where there's such an influx of so much visual stimulation that it's changed because it's not as purposeful or pointed anymore. Whereas when I was coming up, we really had to research things. Like I had to go to the library, or I had to know specifically what I was looking at and go after it and like watch that documentary or whatever. And now it's just sort of like coming, and it's coming so fast that a lot of people aren't really like delving into it or understanding it. They're just like, oh, that's cool, I'm gonna copy it and put it here. Or, I'm gonna use this reference. And then that's why a lot of knocking off is happening, where people are just using like a rose without knowing like, hey, that rose was actually designed by this like tattoo artist that's his signature rose that he's been drawing for the last 50 years, So it's weird. It's just weird navigating it. Does that answer your question? Kind of.
Sort of, it's more or less about like, because I'm also a designer, so I think that like, since there's so much sharing, people think that the barrier to entry inside of the creative world, when it's hyper competitive, when you get to be hanging out with the best, I think people are not ready for that. They think that, oh, I have like a couple of skill sets, they want to tell everybody about it, and then they get burnt out or disillusioned with the idea that it actually is much more difficult, much more competitive than they ever thought it would be. And I think that the narcissism within kind of pop culture and sharing constantly has like made it easy for people to be like, oh, this is what I can do, but it's not sustainable.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's the difference. It's kind of like what I was talking about earlier when we were talking about like blueprint. I think that's really the difference between somebody who actually is and isn't, I mean, you've seen like everybody and their moms is a creative director now, or everybody has this self-given title. But it's interesting because it's like, yeah, I do believe you need to put the work in, but I also don't believe in the concept of paying dues, because it's like, what does that really mean? Like, if you're it, you're it. But so yeah, I agree. It's tricky, but I think we're also becoming more because we're seeing so much of it. We're becoming more keen on identifying what's real and what's not. Like I think we're becoming sharper in that way, which is normal. Like as with everything, where you get an influx, you just start to look for things more specifically.
Totally.
Yeah.
We're all participating in the same reality.
Yes.
Like design is so subjective, but we kind of inherently know as taste makers or whatever it is that we do, what works, what doesn't work. We don't know why.
Yes.
Explain that. Like that's a shitty shoe. Can't tell you. Maybe with the construction or materials or process, something at the foundational level, I feel like doesn't work for me, and I wouldn't choose to pursue it. It's something that Jeff was talking about earlier. It's like you're disappointed when people don't like want to wear your stuff that you put so much effort into that you think were the right choices.
Yeah, I agree. Thank
But
you.
as we were saying before, the right people are drawn to, what you're doing. So they'll, understand, and then you'll always find your audience eventually. I guess it's just finding your own DNA, and then getting over that hurdle of like self-confidence, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I never sought a particular audience. I just made stuff that kind of like how Hiroshi was saying, like I started off making things that I couldn't find in the market. Like back then, I really wanted oversized earrings, and there just wasn't any. Everything was like really delicate and small, and so I started making that, and then I just started attracting all the girls that were like me that were looking for the same thing. So it wasn't like I was like, I'm designing this for these people here. That would totally mess me up. Like I couldn't think that way. So I think it always starts with like, what would I wear? What do I want? What's missing?
In a way, is it also don't look at what others are doing?
What?
In a way, is it also don't look at what others are doing?
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. Yeah, because it's distracting. It's consumption.
Visual consumption.
Yeah.
And then that's, infiltrating your mind, and that's where we get that collective thought, where people are producing the same stuff, almost.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have a question?
Anybody else? Yes. How do inspire? The question was that as a designer, it's really challenging to come up with ideas every season. So how do I inspire myself? That's a great question. I haven't figured that out. This whole last year, I literally didn't design anything new, like nothing. It just felt like.
You didn't feel the urge to do
No, I just didn't. I wasn't inspired. And I think it was partially because I was going through stuff. I had gotten to a breakup. I was just questioning a bunch of things in life. And so I just wasn't inspired. So I just didn't make anything. But I think that's why it's important. Now I'm learning that's why it's important to have a team of people that you work with. Because if you're not inspired, somebody else can bring that inspiration to you. Or you can like bounce off each other. Like this last year, I had the privilege of working very closely with Lauryn Hill, and it was the first time in my life that I got to bounce ideas off somebody that I felt like was on my level. Because she's so brilliant in terms of not just music, but she's so brilliant from a design standpoint. And so when she was giving me her ideas about what she wanted to do, it was like every day I was just like drawing stuff and coming up with stuff and pulling stuff and writing stuff down. Like I couldn't sleep at night because she was inspiring me. Because she was changing my perspective, because she has her own thing, and she has her own work ethic. And it just felt like, it was like the best feeling on the planet, because I got to like vibe out with somebody in that way. And so it really made me understand like why musicians love to get in the studio together and like collaborate. And I think that's really important, because with me, I've always done it all by myself. And because I was like, I need to isolate and do this. But now as I'm getting more into my process, I'm realizing that collaboration is actually really important, especially if you have a brand and you're trying to keep it, like you have to keep up with the season. Yeah.
So actually, tell us more about the Lauryn Hill collaboration, or what you did together.
So Miss Hill, actually, she had a tour this year, and she hasn't done tour merchandise. Well, she's done like random tour merch items, but she hasn't done a photo shoot in over 20 years. So since Miss Education, a photographer has never shot her professionally. And I had the privilege of working with her in the last 5 years on her tour stuff. Like I'd make jewelry for her, I'd do different things for her. And I've been in her ear about merch, because I'm like, I want a t-shirt with your picture on it.
The one you're wearing right now?
Yeah, exactly. So finally, I think the stars aligned and she was ready. And so she allowed me to set up a photo shoot with her. So we did 2 days of shooting, 24-hour shoots, by the way. And it was incredible. Like we shot the most incredible imagery of her, and then we've started to use the imagery on different things. And she's a genius herself, so she's designed like a whole clothing line, and I've just sort of helped her develop it from a practical standpoint.
Any other questions, guys? So maybe I'll end the conversation with what are you most excited about now? Maybe with the brand or in your life. Yeah, looking forward. What can we expect next year from Melody Ehsani?
I'm really excited about growing. I think for the last couple of years, I didn't really know if I wanted to grow or not. I was kind of happy, like, sort of being neighborhoody, and the thing that just keeps coming back over and over is that it's much more global than I, care to want it to be.
Because you mentioned a lot of your customer base is international.
Yeah. So we sell to 84 countries online, which is insane because we've never spent $1 on marketing. We don't have PR. We don't do promo. It's all word of mouth, which is incredible because women are incredible and they talk about things that they love, which is such a blessing.
And then word of mouth is the strongest marketing tool.
Yeah, exactly.
Form of communication.
It really is. So it's really exciting to sort of like finally step into it and embrace this idea of growth. And that's why I'm here. Like, I would have never been here otherwise. So it's really amazing. It's such a privilege connecting with new people and being a part of new cultures and seeing things from different paradigms. It's really, really exciting.
It is now an international community.
It really
so like,
is.
When Hiroshi was saying, like, people weren't into sneakers back then, or there wasn't really a culture. Now, in a sense, the digital age is exciting because it has allowed for people across the side of the world to link, connect, motivate one another. Yeah, it's an exciting time. No?
It is.
Melody's store she's only got a store in, LA, Fairfax. But hopefully we'll see something across the waters next year or sometime soon. All right, well, thank you everyone for coming down.
Thank
and
you.
Melody will be here, I guess, if you have any other questions you want to ask her later. So, cool.
Thank you so much.